Yeah, I was just before the Q&A. I was going to quickly say that if you were unable to like get a copy, which sadly that's the case. I have a thing where you can buy one, and if you want to get it signed, you can just like mail it to me. I can sign it and mail it back to you, and that's completely okay. If you think that's a thing, you can just like shoot me a message on social media or like the interwebs or whatever. Thank you. Oh yeah. If you've got questions, I don't mind. One more question? Yeah, go ahead. It's fine.
I was just gonna say when you use the, I don't know where it is, like, to use like some gun, other cultures was with your culture,
Yeah.
to bring it into one,
Yeah.
like for that kind of education.
Yeah. A lot of deities in the cosmologies across many parts of where I come from not just like from the specific ethnic group that I'm from in Nigeria, down to the country itself and down to West Africa and down to the rest of the continent. There's a lot of crossover. You will see that Yoruba cosmology has been, you see it represented in some other work, like say anyone who has published work out of the east coast of South America, Brazil, Cuba, you see that reflection. So for instance, in Children of Blood and Bone, there's a huge presence of Orishas um, as interpreted by the by say Brazilian Santeria religion, which is pretty much a combination of Orisha cosmology and Christian cosmology. So you'd see that, and you see it. You also see it in some work by folks from that have Caribbean roots, like if you've read anything by B.J. Clark, the Black God's Drums has an Orisha in it, etc. So it's pretty much already out there. This is just like one iteration. Um, the west of Nigeria has its own particular take on Orishas and Yoruba cosmology, and this was just that interpretation. And it's interesting because I'm not even Yoruba. I'm from the south, and Yorubas are usually from the west of Nigeria. But my wife is Yoruba, so and even at that, this is not with the advent of like Christianity, this is not something that usually came to the fore or used to come to the fore. So I had to like really ask questions, like go deep and ask folks who'd be willing to talk about it because it's also not something that people are completely comfortable talking about. But yeah, I always knew that it was going to be a story. It was set in Lagos. Lagos is in the west of Nigeria, so it only made sense that it was going to be gods from the western part. And then I did my research. Some of the gods cross over to my own pantheon, so I made sure I drew on those as well. And then the story just pretty much told itself. Lagos is a very crazy city, and it's pretty much just easy to find danger lurking in every corner, whether there are gods there or not. So, and it was pretty much just easy to tell the story from then on.
In the context of your novel, was there an event that caused all the gods to come down, or had they been around for a while?
Yes. Yeah. So prior to there's before the novel opens, there's an event called the Falling, where there's actually a war in Yoruba cosmology, the place where the gods live, which is like Asgard, is called Oru. It literally translates to the sky, and in Christian cosmology now, it'd be seen as heaven. So pretty much, all on the same parallel. And there's a war there, and many of the gods that disagree with the arbiter of the person who controls the god who controls things in Oru. His name is Obatala, and he kicks them out, a lot of them. But mostly Shango and Agonju, who are like the two major. Agonju is Shango's brother. He's the god of volcanoes and magma. So so they're kind of like the same thing. They're just like the troublemakers, and so they get kicked out of Oru and down to different parallel existences, and one of them just happens to be Lagos. And that's where, so it's an event that Lagosians get to refer to as the falling. And so the city of Lagos is very populated. It has like 25 million people. Yeah, that's a lot of people. And imagine having like lots of gods come add to that. So what happened is pretty much like the city just reacts, and the government, if you know anything about Nigerian government, they're very hands off. They're just like, yeah, that's not my shit. And so they pretty much just, yeah. And so all of these gods are in the city, and they're just like, nope. And they just like pack up and like move somewhere else, like move the city somewhere else. And so you have like this pretty empty place, and only those who can't afford to move, yeah, only those who can afford to move remain. And so you have like the socioeconomically disadvantaged and people like that remain in the city, of which the Mogo is one. And so sometimes the gods make their way. There's godlings which are, there's a story there, so you probably should read the book so that I don't spoil anything. But yeah, and David's work as a god hunter is actually to go fish out godlings who have wandered into the wrong place for rich people. So he works for like folks who are like, yeah, I don't want that godling in my water tank, so get it out. Yeah, and so David shows up and he haggles and then gets the godling out of the tank and takes it to somewhere on the other, the mainland where like folks, where godlings live, they're like, yeah, we don't want those here. So if you, as you can probably already think, it has a lot to talk about like class, differences and stuff like that. And so yeah, that's pretty much what happens. The premise of the book, or what really kicks the book off, is someone then hires David to capture some particular gods that are very powerful and also very, can be used for nefarious purposes. And he's like not really comfortable with it, but he's got to eat and pay rent, so he does it. And then things don't turn out really well and has to go back and fix it, and that sparks a whole new conflict in Lagos. Okay, thanks, Jack. Go ahead.
It is time to end.
Yeah.
It's time to end.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. If we're good, then this is a good time.
Oh, okay, go.
Yeah, you were talking about choosing to make one of the gods non-binary. That to me sounded like a no-brainer because you were talking about like the conflict of whether it was male or female. But how controversial was that with that decision? Do you see?
It's so controversial that I haven't told my parents about it yet. Because my parents are on team male, because the god's male in my pantheon. So they're like, what did you, so I'm just like, yeah, let's hope they don't catch on to that part. But yeah, that's also a good point, because another thing, I also gender flip a couple of gods, that's also controversial. There's some gods that are like traditionally male that I made female, and a very good one is the god of war. It's female. That's not something that, Nigeria is a very conservative society. That's not something they will take very kindly, but like, haha. And then the other thing is, I don't know if you know this, but Nigeria is also, there's, queerness is criminalized in the country, so you have 14 years imprisonment if you're a queer person or you're a supporter of queer people, or audibly, like publicly. And so this was also some sort of like way to push back at that. There's a good dose of queerness in it, enough that I don't know if any of you was there where I told the story at Omar.com where someone at the reading, I had a reading in Lagos before coming here, and someone just like came by. I was like, high five. I was like, okay, and she gave me a high five and just whispered, I see you managed to slip some lesbians in there. So, yeah. So I felt like, okay, all of this, I subtly, but it's not something that's really easy to do that explicitly because of like where we're working with, but it can be done, and those who recognize it, and I could, that was like affirmation that at least one person got it. And I think it went down well with a lot of people, all of these changes that were made, and I've not got heard back from my parents. I mailed the book, then flew out of the country. So, so yeah. So when they call me, I don't pick up. Yeah.
So we should send them this video.
Yes, I will do that. Eventually, in 2025.
So I know you've talked about this, especially because in the original, like both in Yoruba and Isan, like Yoruba doesn't have a male female pronoun. We don't do that.
Yeah.
And Isan like the same way too,
Yeah.
somewhat. And initially, like kind of pre-colonialism, it was okay to kind of have like what people understand as queerness now.
Yeah.
But kind of with the introduction of colonialism and
Yeah.
religion, it's kind of conservative. So can you give kind of a little bit of context with the characters, which is where you're trying to go, like, especially with like that narrative? Like, how does this book fit to help people, Nigerian people
Understand.
understand
Yeah.
their history? Yeah.
That's a very fair point. So one of the things, Yoruba, for instance, doesn't have, it has just one pronoun. Yoruba language just has one pronoun. There's no like he, she, it's one pronoun for everyone and everything. And so queerness and being on, anywhere along the spectrum of gender identity and sexual identity has been always welcome prior to colonization. And so that's why part of all of this issue, mostly what we have now as say male female gods, it's really just attributes, like, right, the god of reproduction, or like it's seen as female, and the god of like strength or like power, stuff with like affiliated with power is seen as male, etc. But it wasn't quite that way prior. It was just people just saw a person most of the or a god, and they didn't care about gender or whatever. And so yeah, so kind of flipping these things kind of made it easy for most, because to be honest, I'll tell you the truth, I wrote this book for Nigerians first and foremost, because I felt like there wasn't like a lot of work that really went this deep, right, into the cosmology. So one of the things it does is remove that idea of leading with these concepts of gender, especially since we're talking about what deities, like there's no gender in a deity. And so yeah, so sort of like bringing us back to that point where we're at, where we see things in a spectrum that we should perceive things, and sort of like take us back to how all of these, there's a lot of points in the book where some people talk about their history, especially some of these gods, and you can see where they're coming from. And even when they're gender flipped, you see that there's not even anything that changes. And so it's just completely perception about how they're gendered. And it has nothing to do with origin, it has nothing. So I did try to pass that across. Hopefully some people get it. Hopefully I get some more high five and some high fives at readings, and people like giving me, whispering in my ear about stuff like that, and I'll be like completely glad. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.